Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jerred Moon. The Garage Gym Athlete Podcast is a result of my desire to build better humans, unequivocal coaches, and autonomous athletes. I've spent the last several years obsessing over program design, nutrition, and every other way you can optimize human performance. This podcast distills the latest scientific research with what I've learned and blends it with the not-so-scientific field of mental toughness. We are here to build you into a dangerously effective athlete. If you enjoy this podcast, you can find out more about our training at garagegymathlete.com. And if you want to pursue more into the field of coaching and programming, head to endof3fitness.com. Thanks for listening. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jerred Moon here with Kyle Schrum, Ashley Hicks, and Joe Courtney. Everyone, how's it going?
Hola.
So we've gotten some feedback that they like the Weekend Warrior Fueling series, listeners. Hopefully we dive in more today and you get even more out of it. I think carbohydrates are pretty popular, more well-known. I would say most people who are not even in fitness and nutrition know something about carbohydrates and an endurance event. Like, yeah, carbo loading, like people know the basics of those kind of things, maybe not the numbers and everything else, but where I would say most people don't know anything is one of the things we're talking about today, and that's protein and fat. So to me, these are kind of the forgotten macronutrients when we're talking about events. Everyone knows protein is important. Fat has been demonized for a long time to the point where people don't really know, like, is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. And so we're going to be diving into those today and getting more to the science. So we're covering the study more so. It was Nutrition and Supplement Update for the Endurance Athlete. Review and recommendations. It was done in 2019. And we're talking about sections 3.2 and 3.3 today, which will be protein and fat. I'm gonna kick it off with just the overall statement that they said, because I agree with it when it comes to protein. And then we can get into the different sections. So the different sections are protein overall, daily protein requirements, pre, during, and post-exercise protein requirements, and then fat. Those are kind of the different categories here. But what they said right at the opening of protein in this study, I thought was very true. They said, traditionally, endurance athletes have placed less of a priority on protein in comparison to carbohydrate. However, adequate protein intake and timing of intake are critical to any athlete, whether endurance or resistance trained. So it's a big deal. It's not like something that you can just, I'll get some protein later. The timing is very important, as well as the overall amount. And I feel like there are a lot of like numbers and things, and I don't want to take anything away from any of you. And so I will kind of fill in the gaps here when we're talking about protein if I feel like I caught something that was missed. But let's talk about protein. We could probably open it up to protein and daily protein requirements as opposed to opening up the whole thing. I think 3.2 was too small of a section to discuss in any real detail. But let's what did you guys pull from 3.2, the overall protein thing, and then 3.2.1, which was daily protein requirements?
So for the protein, I felt like they talked about that they put less of a priority on it. Endurance athletes do. But I feel like working with, clients and then women's health track and having a lot of coaching experience, a lot of athletes, I feel like actually don't eat the amount of protein that they need. And so I definitely loved that they talked about that it was less of a priority, and that they're probably eating more carbohydrates than they actually need. But so for the daily protein requirements, we've talked about timing on here too. They talked about post as well as during and pre. But they talked about 0 to 2 hours post exercise, which we've always said, like, at least try to get it in within the hour, I'm pretty sure is what we've always recommended. But the thing I wanted to highlight with that was they talked about a quality protein source, because I feel like a lot of people are getting protein supplementation and it might not be the best quality for them. So that was something that I wanted to hit on. And then it talked about that if you have too much protein, that it's actually not beneficial. And it sounds like you need to consume the protein like throughout the day. Like don't just like try to front load it and like try to get all your protein macros in prior to, you know, that you have to like actually go throughout, you know, space it out a couple hours each day, you know, 3 meals a day if you're having, or, you know, plus a post-workout shake, or I'll get into the pre for the next one. I'll let one of the other guys hit that, but.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of those, the one you're talking about with the moderate to high protein, there was a study that compared 1.5 grams per kilogram versus 3 grams per kilogram, and they yielded the same results, same performance, same gains, if you will. So overloading on protein, it's just stuffing yourself with protein. It isn't a magical, you know, I'm going to get a whole lot better. It's just you just still hit the moderate and not
really only costing you money at a certain point.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
trips to the bathroom,
probably constipation too. Yeah. And then, the other one that, and even going off of what you said for quality protein versus the source, that's another thing to highlight, is that they didn't find, you know, whey, plant, beef, chick, whatever kind of protein. As long as the source was good, then it was pretty much equal as far as like standards go. So it's just it just depends on the amino acid breakdown and if the source is actually good and clean type of protein. And I mean, all of us have pretty much used different proteins just because of whatever our own issues, gut stuff, skin things, whatever we can tolerate, just because of yeah. And then the only new thing that I'll bring up is that was pretty interesting was there was one thing I missed what the ISSN stood for. It was one of the they reference it a lot to be like, you know, this group's standards. And one of the standards was they recommended 0.25 grams per kilogram per hour during an event, which is super high. But then toward the end of this protein section, the actual people who did the study, the breakdown, said they actually recommended to do about that much, about a serving, anywhere from 20 to 40 grams every 3 to 5 hours during an event, if you're doing that.
You're jumping ahead. You're jumping ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was like, that's not
slightly related. Okay, well then, Kyle, just rewind.
There's the rewind sound. So
I mean, we could just dive into all of it, but then I'm just gonna have too much to say.
I'm gonna go back to just kind of the very first part of it, and I like what it talks about. Have placed less of a priority on protein comparison to carbs. And my takeaway from that was just something that we talk about a lot on the podcast, talk about it a lot in our community, just with our program and our training and things, is like strength is the base. It's the foundation, right? Everything that you do, you need to be strong, right? And I'm not saying you need to be as strong as you can possibly be, right? Especially since we're framing this conversation with endurance athletes. And so endurance athletes are not going to be as focused on building muscle or building strength as athletes for other types of events. But endurance athletes still need to focus on strength. They still have to be strong. No matter what it is that you're doing, you need muscle in order to do it. Those muscles need to be strong. And so when we're talking about protein, we're talking about building muscle, we're talking about supporting muscle, we're talking about all those different kinds of things. To me, that's something you don't need to neglect protein in your diet or in your training plan, because you need muscle and you need to be strong. And so that's just kind of what it called back to me as something that we talk to people about all the time, is you need to be strong, you need muscle. So talking about protein, it's important. It's important for everybody, no matter what it is that you're doing.
Yeah. And I think important that you said you don't have to be as strong as you possibly could be, but maybe just a certain amount of strength in relation to your body weight per our standards, right? Like, if you actually look at our standards of strength training, they're not ridiculous. Even the competitor level, which is our highest level we think you should be, is not like absurdly strong. I mean, it's strong. Don't get me wrong. It is a very strong human being, but it's not like, it's nowhere close to what a, let's say, CrossFit Games athlete or power lifter would be touching. Well, maybe power lifter in relation to their body weight, but no, they'd still be a lot stronger than that. So anyway, that's how we feel strength fits in here. You know, strength is very important, and it's going to make you better at everything. And protein is a major factor in that. So the actual ingestion points for athletes, the range that they said was 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram a day. And so for me, 185 pound male, that's around 100 to 170 grams of protein per day. And I'm perfectly agree with those. And, you know, a lot of times when we get into recommendations, like when we were talking about carbohydrates last week, we're all kind of like,
no,
that's a little high.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
maybe you can pull it off but we do think their overall recommendations for just carbohydrates for athletes on a daily basis. You can do that, by the way. I'm not saying you can't. We just feel a little uncomfortable with our experience and our bodies, things that we've done. I don't necessarily think it's to your detriment. There's still science behind everything that was mentioned last week, but this one I just fully agree with, like 100 to 170 grams for me per day. When a lot of times when you get into these kind of the research or study, or let's just say bro science, what people are recommending bodybuilders, they're going to 2 and 3. I've heard up to 2.5 grams per pound of body weight before. Like, and we're not talking about kilograms anymore. We're talking about, so that's 185 pounds times 2.5, you know, and I can never get on board with those recommendations. And there is a certain point to where protein can become hard on the kidneys. That's just, it's a fact. So what a lot of people, this is where the vegans typically go to try and like disprove that you don't need a lot of protein, but it takes a lot of protein. It would take the 400 grams of protein per day. And most of the research that's actually out there with incredibly high protein diets for bodybuilders, they put them through a lab and there's still no detriment to their kidneys whatsoever. So I really feel like really high protein diets matched with physical activity, you're very rarely going to have a problem with your kidneys or anything else. Yes, if you are 65 years old, you do no sort of training whatsoever, and I try and put you on a 300 gram per day protein diet, I might shut your kidneys down, you know, but that's not who's listening to this and why you shouldn't be concerned about protein in kidneys for the most part. And one thing that I pulled out of 3.2.1 daily protein requirements was they gave a range, right? It was 1.2 grams per kilogram to 2.0. And they say you should kind of fluctuate that range based on training. And, you know, we're recording this a day after I was just in a car for 13 hours with my family. And I probably ingested, if I had to honestly think about it, like 70 grams of protein in total yesterday. Like that's it. And I didn't eat that much either. But I knew my body didn't need anything. I was like, you're sitting all day. Like you're not going to need, you know, any amount of carbohydrate basically to operate today, protein, you know, just to keep things going. But like, if you can kind of look at your training like that, you're like, I'm more on like 3 block right now. I'm only hitting it 3 days a week. You probably don't need these top end of the ranges we're giving. But if you're like hard to kill every day, Murph twice a week, let's max out these ranges. And then the other thing they mentioned was, and this is a thing that more strength athletes get scared of, is that endurance training is catabolic. I mean, it's basically eating away. It's breaking down. Metabolic is building up, catabolic is building down, or anabolic is building up, should I say. And catabolic is tearing down. And this is what strength athletes, more specifically bodybuilders and sometimes powerlifters, get scared of. Any sort of endurance training eating away at your muscle is how they kind of look at it. And that's really only true under 2 scenarios. One, you're training outside of zones you really shouldn't. Like, I'm going to go on a 5-mile run today and just be in zone 5 the whole time. Yeah, that's going to be bad. And that is what strength athletes do, because they don't know how to train endurance. So they just run as hard as they can. They think that they hate running because their heart rate is jacked way too high. Running is horrible. And yeah, it is eating your muscle away when you do it that way. So that's one thing to note. It can be catabolic, but it's not if you're hitting it around. The second thing I want to hit on is, if you're properly fueled, it probably doesn't matter. If I'm going on an hour-long run and I've taken in the proper dosage of, which we're going to talk about in a minute, of protein and carbohydrates before the run, my body will rely heavily on what I've given it and not trying to pull from, you know, these stores that I have, unless you actually have to tap into them. And so that's about it. The other thing I pulled from that was muscle protein synthesis. And we're also going to talk about this in the next section, but muscle protein synthesis has a window and it has a cap. So if you have like this 24-hour window to kind of get in with your muscle protein synthesis window, but they said the ideal post-training hour is 0 to 2 hour window at 0.25 to 3 grams per kilogram. So that's 21 grams to 25 grams post-workout. And that's all I'll say, because that leads right into the pre, during, and post-exercise protein requirements. But this whole window of gains thing, there is some truth to it, but you actually have a much larger window than most people think, up to 24 hours for it to still be effective. So that's kind of daily protein requirements. Everyone can go calculate those on your own. That's about how much protein you should be taking in if you have a regular training schedule. Now getting to 3.2.2, pre, during, and post-exercise protein requirements. Let's start with Joe, because you're already diving in here, man. What did you find? What did you find interesting here? And sorry to cut you off earlier, but I just wanted to flow this direction.
The rest of the podcast has now caught up with Joe.
Since I did not say anything earlier, this just didn't happen. They were talking about how for fueling, that whatever this organization was, recommended 0.25 grams per kilogram per hour during an event, but the people putting together this study and breakdown actually recommended basically that's whatever your serving size is, 20 to 40, whatever your weight is, would be that serving every 3 to 5 hours. So for most people, you might only need one serving during your event, because unless you're doing like a really ultra distance 6+ hour thing, which was good to know. I know when we've done certain events before, I haven't been so worried about getting protein during. It's been more before. Like I made sure to hit a smoothie or something before, and then I know like 3-4 hours, I'm still good for it. But toward the end, I might think about it. But other than that, it just comes down to recovery. But they found that it did help with feelings with soreness, and limited the muscle damage during, which in the long run, if you're doing a longer event, can really help pay off. You know, it's not all about the carbs and the energy. You're still kind of fighting against your muscles and repairing that. So that was the main one that I found for during. And then, as always, the gut is going to be kind of involve how you do your doses before or during. And you can't just, practice how you play. You can't just like jump right into it and think you're gonna be okay. So,
and the ISSN is the International Society of Sports Nutrition.
Yes, their recommendation was pretty high for per hour during. So
I think it calls back to what we were talking about last week as well with carbs, and just kind of the point that was made about the length of your event. We were kind of talking about anything under 90 minutes, like your fueling strategy for something less than 90 minutes, or especially like under 60 minutes. I think Jerry made the point, like if your event is less than 60 minutes, you're not going to need to think about fueling during that event very much at all, because you're just not going to be moving. Your event's not going to last long enough where fueling during is going to make much of a difference, versus if it's something over 90 minutes, like that's when the fueling during conversation kind of comes into play a little bit more. And especially thinking about protein, like Joe was talking about, like events that we've done together as a team in the past. And like, I wasn't really even thinking about protein during the event. Like, I'm especially thinking about the Spartan races, the beast that we did. Like even as long as that event was for me, I wasn't really thinking about the protein that I needed during. I had protein the night before. I had a little bit of protein the morning of, and then I made sure to hit protein after the event was over. But like during the event, I wasn't really focused on the protein. Maybe I should have been, but I wasn't really focused as much on the protein for getting that event done. I was focused more on other types of fuel to get through the event. So that's something else too to think about, is what kind of event are you doing and how long is it going to take? And that kind of comes into play as well with protein recommendations.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is it says if tolerable, and they talked about, GI issues and whatnot, because, if we're doing endurance stuff, if this is what we're reaching out to, I kind of agree with you, Kyle. Maybe we should have, cause I want to say we all sat around and we definitely had some protein with some carbohydrates in it, which, and then we also definitely ate a lot of Emily's chili afterwards when we were done. But during, we just more focused on like the Cliff Chews and the salt biscuits and all that stuff. So it makes me wonder, like, what would have been different if we would have ingested protein for that amount of time. But, if if you're not doing an endurance thing, if you're just like, you know, when we train daily, 60 minutes, maybe 90 minutes, whatever it is that you are training for, I don't necessarily think, you know, you need the potentially the protein prior to your training. You know, lots of people work out fasted. So again, that's what I took away from that. It's if it was tolerable for you. But the added carbs they talked about it helped with the muscle glycogen synthesis. But for me, it said if an athlete eats a lot of carbs, it doesn't seem to help them. And I feel like the amount of carbs that they recommended were already high. So it just made me question, like, what did they feel was too many carbs for an athlete? I don't know. I just was like, if you're already recommending 400 to 500 grams of carbohydrates daily, what's your takeaway on high carb? And then a couple of things I'll hit on. They talked about leucine content, which we've talked about here in the podcast before. And then BCAAs, what I found interesting, they said that BCAAs by themselves actually didn't seem to help stimulate the muscle protein synthesis, which I mean, makes sense. But I know a lot of people that take just straight BCAAs trying to get the, you know, amino acids that they can. But what they recommended was find a good quality protein supplement, which, does this sound familiar? That has leucine and BCAAs and the, you know, what you need to get all the adequate amount of good things to help, you know, with that muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah, that was an awesome thing that I saw and to hit on, because you see some people that take BCAAs just as pre-workout, and like some claim that you can still take those and be fasted. So it's like they're hacking it, but it's still fairly incomplete.
Yeah, and I'll pick up there with leucine, because we have been talking about leucine for years, and it's finally like it's caught up. And I'm not just talking about the scientific research. I'm talking because the reason I started talking about leucine was because of scientific research. Mm-hmm. Like several years ago, I was just kind of ahead of the curve a little bit by noticing like BCAAs are kind of crap. Like it all comes down to like leucine specifically, especially if you're taking in complete proteins like meat or whatever protein source that you have. And it all seemed like to stimulate muscle protein synthesis the most, it seemed to be the leucine content. And so I stumbled across that, but who had not picked up on this information were supplement makers. They weren't reporting, they weren't making sure there's enough leucine. It wasn't a concern. And if you're only pushing whey protein, you're going to be fine. Whey protein has the most leucine, you know, biggest bang for your buck that you can get. But a lot of people don't want whey protein, can't consume whey protein. And so that's where it was getting difficult from a supplementation standpoint. It was like, if it wasn't whey protein, nothing else like stood up to the leucine content or the effectiveness. And so now a lot of these manufacturers have caught up. Like I'm currently using Onnit's plant-based protein. I don't even think it tastes that good, but it has the best leucine content. Obviously not a sponsor, right?
Not a sponsor.
Yeah. Like it doesn't, it's like I have consumed way better tasting protein powders, but this is a plant-based protein with the highest level of leucine. And so I'm like, cool, I'll be here for now. And now I already have like 2 or 3 proteins on my list that have come out recently that have matched that same thing. So now it's just becoming a norm. It's not like one company does it. All the companies are figuring it out. But if you are taking a plant-based protein from anywhere else, go find out what the leucine content is. We've been saying that for a long time. And typically you'd want, they said 700 milligrams to 3 grams, and 3 grams is typically my recommendation just based from the research. So you want to look at that. Now diving into their pre, during, post. Yeah. So it seems like pre-exercise dose of 0.3 grams per kilogram of protein according to GI tolerance. So for me, they're talking about taking 25 grams of protein pre-workout. I don't think that's that crazy. That's really just like eating before you train. I mean, you should always be consuming, I don't know if I'm ever consuming less than 20 grams of protein when I go to eat food. If you are, maybe take that into account, you know, make sure you're getting that protein dose. And then, yeah, during, I have played around with the during, and I don't know, like there are these carbohydrate mixed with protein supplements. Like I think you can, was one that I mentioned last time that I don't use anymore, but it's primarily a carbohydrate supplement. But I think they have a carb plus protein now. It's probably whey protein. Go figure. But like, I think they have it, like other like endurance supplement companies are starting to catch on. And there's not an easy way to do it. So, I mean, I think that if you're going to be serious about consuming any sort of protein during your event, like it almost has to be in liquid format. And so you're going to have to supplement, because I personally, hitting on Chris Morgan again, don't want to eat a Big Mac or whatever during my event, even though it has the amount of protein. But hey, he might be ahead of the curve here with the protein there. But yeah, it seems like it's important. And the biggest thing that I pulled out was no study shows that it hinders performance. And that's with taking protein before, during, or after. They didn't come across any studies where they're like, yeah, I was taking 30 grams of protein during my run and it really slowed me down, or like, no, there was nothing that hindered it. All the available evidence shows that it improves either your performance that day or your recovery or whatever. So it's definitely something worth doing. The actual amount pre was 0.3 grams per kilograms for people who want to calculate this out, and 0.25 grams per kilogram protein per hour when taken along with carbohydrate to minimize potential muscle damage. So there are your official numbers and recommendations.
What do you think you would have to do? Like for us, for the beast, you would just have to, like, again, carry your fanny pack, you know, there you go, Joe. And then put just the supplementation in your fanny pack. And every time you go to a water station, you just put this thing in and shake it up. Or
yeah, I think for a beast, you'd have to do something like that. Like what I did during, what is the company? I don't even know if they're still a company. It's called 3 Fuel. Have you guys ever tried that supplement out? So they were ahead of the curve, like way ahead of the curve. Brian McKenzie, if you guys are familiar with him,
yeah,
popular in the CrossFit world, he started a company several years ago called 3 Fuel. And it was a carbohydrate and protein supplement. So I've actually used that during 100-mile bike races. And what I've done is those shirts, the jerseys that I use normally have pockets in the back. And so I would just have like 2 or 3 like serving sizes in a Ziploc bag. But the easy thing with a bike is I have 2 water bottles attached to the frame at all times, right? So like it's easy to just throw it in a water bottle and mix it up. But as far as the Spartan race, yeah, that would be hard to do. Is like, yeah, give me this water, like, and then you're just like trying to shake it with your hand or something, like
mix it with your finger.
Yeah, like I do think that's why protein during a race is complicated, because if you're also serious about your time at all, that's time consuming.
Yeah.
So some sort of liquid based, and I mean like not mixable, like a pure liquid. They have those on the market, like something you could carry might be the best option. But I don't know how much it's going to add to your performance, as long as you have the carbohydrates dialed in. So how necessary it is, I don't know. But yeah, I forgot that I've done that on during the races of the 100-mile bike race. I always have protein and carbs, but my reasoning behind that wasn't protein will give me performance. It was just like, this is a long day. I can't eat no protein today, you know? So like I have to have me some protein. So that's why that decision was made.
Your English is really good right now.
You like it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that was it. The only other thing I want to say, I said from a scientific standpoint, dairy-based protein, whey, casein, and whole milk, lean meats, eggs, all stimulate muscle protein synthesis effectively. However, dairy-based proteins may be superior to other sources due to higher leucine content and improved digestion, absorption kinetics of the EAAs found in liquid-based dairy foods. So there you go. If you like whey, want to stick with whey, no problems with whey, you should probably take whey. I don't, because I can't. I would if I could, but I can't, so I don't.
No way.
Yeah, no way for me. So yeah, that's that on pre, during, and post exercise. Now that's all protein. We could talk about fat now. There's either a lot or very little to say on fat. I haven't seen anyone's notes, but let's dive into it. Probably the most forgotten macronutrient when it comes to weekend warrior fueling. So fat, what do we have? Joe.
Well, I think for fueling, if you just think about fat caloric wise, it's going to be the best bang for your buck. And I'm just thinking race day and all those, and anytime like working out and stuff, I want less volume in my stomach. Like even drinking water sloshing around sucks. And when you're doing these endurance events and needing these calories and stuff, fat is going to give you the most bang for your buck for volume, for calories and energy. And we've also already talked about being fat adapted and training low, and how that's going to be the most efficient for you. So that adapting to being to using fat as fuel, we yeah, I think it's going to be, it even showed to be a bit better on here if you need to prepare yourself for it. And that's the main thing. Side effects, I think that even they illuminated it onto here, is that you actually have to like put in the work and actually make yourself fat adapted, or else and get into training low, or else you're just going to feel like you crash. And I know when I first started doing that, and others, you can't just be like, you know what, I've been eating 40%, 45% plus carbs, I'm just going to go and be fat adapted, I'm going to go and train fasted and start eating high fat, and I'll be fine. And then you're just going to crash and pass out and be done.
You also can't do both. And this is where I think a lot of athletes miss it too. You can't be moderate to high carb and moderate to high fat, which is that's fine for a diet, but you're still not actually that fat adapted. Your body may be more accustomed to it, but if you're like, you know what, let's chug some olive oil during my next event, you're just going to poop your pants all over the place. And that's not going to be a very fun event for you. So the adaptation that Joe's talking about is of vital importance in the fat discussion here. So just keep that in mind.
I'll pass it off from there.
Well, they talked about too, training low. We hit on this last time. So with, especially with the ultra endurance athletes who are not like tapping into the higher zones, they talked about, becoming fat adapted and training low. Just, that says obviously it promotes weight loss, but I found very interesting that for me, it kind of highlighted, it depends on the type of race you're doing, which we have said this multiple times now. If you're doing an endurance race that you, for some reason, have to tap into zone 4 to 5 the whole time, then this is not, it basically said that it didn't really work for people that were in higher intensities. And so if you're doing an endurance though, an instant sort of endurance race, you're not going to be in zone 4 or 5 to me.
You're doing it wrong.
Yeah. You're not doing it correctly.
You're not going to last very long, be the worst race of your life.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, it shows like, okay, you obviously need to consider fat in your diet. They did talk about fish oil and some omega-3s and CLAs. And they mentioned it with overtraining, which if you're following our Endure track, you're not going to be overtraining. So you should be fine there. But I think fish oil is a great supplementation for anyone to take. And then for me, fats just go further than carbs, just exactly what Joe said. Like it's that whole train low effect where you're tapping into that fat burning energy system instead of burning glycogen the entire time. And I feel like it's not a bad way to go.
So I think just going to the whole mindset around fat as well. And I'm going to get to this later with my killing comfort thing too, but they even talked about this directly in the study. It says it's not to say that fat intake is irrelevant to athletes. Fats are fundamental components of cell membranes, playing roles in signaling and transport, nerve function, providing insulation and vital organ protection, and are the source of essential dietary fatty acids. And so it talks about how, like, by avoiding fat in general, you are missing out on all the benefits that fat gives you. Like your body actually needs it. You know what I mean? And I think fat has kind of been demonized. I think maybe carbs are taking a little bit of that recently, of being a little more demonized than they used to be. But fat has really been demonized for a long, long time. And people just have this negative mentality towards fat in general. And your body needs it. You know what I mean? Your body needs fat. And so by taking it out of the equation and ignoring it and not having a plan for the fat that you take in, this doesn't mean like all fats are good. That's definitely not true, right? You still have to focus on the source of the fat, like what it is that you're eating. You have to eat the good stuff so that your body uses it effectively. But before you even start talking about fueling and how fat needs to work into your training plan, you need to examine your mindset around just fat in general. And I feel like a lot of people have just this negative mindset towards fat in general, whereas actually your body just needs it. You know what I mean? And if you're neglecting it, it's going to affect your performance because it's going to affect just you being a human being from a day-to-day basis. And so like, I think something we also had to think about is like, just what is our mindset towards fat in general, and how are we working that into our daily diet, regardless of what we're training for or what our performance goals are.
100% agree with that, Kyle. And to just hit on like fat quality, I think that's really important and often overlooked as well. So I mentioned I was on a 13-hour road trip with my family yesterday, and highway driving and healthy eating don't go hand in hand. Emily and I still try, and this was our trying yesterday. So we were just completely out of options, and the kids were like, we need to eat. Like you cannot push us any further. Give us food. And so, because we were trying to make it home, it was towards the end of the trip. And so we stopped at Panda Express, and I don't think Panda Express is good by any means, but Emily and I got essentially like chicken, rice, broccoli. And I was like, this should be fine. I felt horrible after.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of the fat they cooked it in, the oil. They cook it in.
What type of fat too?
Right, you're right. It's the type of fat. It's this oil that they cook it in, right? And that's what made it horrible. I had like a slight headache afterwards. I did not feel good, even though I'm eating rice, protein, and vegetables, right? Like that was all I was consuming. But the type of fat that you're consuming makes a huge difference. And it's little things like that that make me realize it even more. It's like, that was, for anyone else in the world, that was a healthy meal, right? But you're like, well, no, let's really talk about it, because it wasn't. But I mean, if your food can be served to you in like under 60 seconds, it's never really going to be a good choice for some reason. But talking about fat in more general terms, the big takeaway I got from that entire section 3.3 was you can't overlook fat and hormones. And I'm not going to dive into it any further than that. You can go look at it if you want to dive into the study more. But I mean, they talk about all sorts of different hormones and its relations to fat. And that's kind of how I think about fat. It's a lot more than just this fuel. Like, there's a huge hormonal component to your body, what it can produce, what it can synthesize when you are consuming the correct amount of fats. And so you do see problems in athletes, primarily physique-based athletes, who think that they should cut all fat out of their diet. And they normally have problems. They struggle with like testosterone and like other things. So you can't cut fat out of your diet, no matter what you think or you've heard. Fat is very important to brain health, overall health. And that was kind of their point. Now, getting into the actual like fueling and fat, like Joe mentioned, you kind of have to, if you're just consuming enough fat in your diet, I think you're just going to be fine. You'll be fine. But if you want to try this more train low approach that we kind of, I think we're advocates for unknowingly. I didn't really know that was a thing. But, and we talked a lot more about train low in the last podcast. If for some reason you hopped on this podcast and didn't hear the previous one, so you can go talk about it. But just training with fewer carbohydrates, burning those up, and letting your body become a little bit more fat adapted. I think it's a worthy shot, like something you should try. And here's another quote from the study. It says, if performance is not an issue, becoming fat adapted and exercising at low, less than 70% of VO2 max intensities, therefore may improve lipolysis and promote weight loss in the overweight athlete. However, if the athlete's focus is on racing and improving performance times, a high fat, low carbohydrate diet restricts the athlete's ability to train and race higher end intensities and may negatively affect their race outcome. And I concur. And they link to 4 studies and everything that I just said. So yeah, if you want to go fast and hard, and we're in the zone 4, zone 5, like, it's pretty proven at this point that your body prefers one fuel, and it is sugar. It is glycogen. That is what, when you get into those intensities, that is all your body wants to burn, and you will run out very fast. They actually give the calorie amounts. You only store about 2,500 calories worth of glycogen or carbohydrate before your body runs out. Fat, you have 70,000 to 75,000 calories of energy. Even in a lean adult, they say that your body can tap into and use. And so there's a lot of benefit to this train low. And so you can hop on a bike or go for a run and just let your body burn fat at a low intensity for a very long period of time and never feel like you're bonking or running out of energy, because to calculate out how long it would take you to burn 70,000 calories, is beyond a day. It's beyond a day's worth of work there. And so that's just something to note. I think it's worth a try to train low. But if you are an athlete who's like at this competitive top end, who does do a lot of zone 4, zone 5 efforts, it's probably not a good idea for you. But I'd say for 99.8% of our athletes, the train low approach is going to be better, especially if you are looking to lose weight. It says specifically, if you're looking to lose weight, go train low, go lower carbohydrate, try to operate and more off of fat in those intensities, and you'll lose more weight and you'll be better off for it. So just something to note. I feel like what we've hit on all the macronutrients now. The next week we'll get into hydration and supplementation, which are also very, very important. But when it comes to carbohydrates, we've given you all the numbers and math for you to calculate what you need for carbohydrates. Take those into account. Protein, we're giving you the same thing, pre, during, post, very important. Fat is kind of, I think those are carbs, and protein are more something you could implement today. Like, I'm going to calculate these things out. Fat is not like I'm going to go eat some MCT oil, coconut oil, and then go work out. Like it doesn't work that way. You kind of have to change your lifestyle to this train low approach for fat to really be this huge factor for your performance. And so that's a much bigger deal. So that kind of sums it up. Did anyone have anything else to say on protein or fat for the day from the study?
Yeah, I would just agree with you on that. And that's especially when we're coaching athletes. We talk about that, like the two that we dial in first. We dial in protein first, and then we talk about carbs. And it's kind of like, we'll worry about fat after we get those two dialed in, because those two are the most important, especially protein, because most people are behind on their protein. They're just not eating enough. And even outside of athletic performance, we're just talking about just daily living. They're outside of their protein, the amount they need to be eating. And so just kind of fat is a lot. It's a lot more to think about and to talk about. And it's like you said, it takes a lifestyle change. So.
Yeah, and this was a little bit illuminating talking about it, because it's so easy for us, because we've always been a higher fat proponent and training low and even like fast and all this stuff. And like, even though we advise all this stuff and like it, it's hard. It's I guess too common for us to overlook the fact that we're just used to it. And then people that might, like newer athletes of ours, might just hear that and be like, all right, cool, that's what I need to be doing. And then they make the change right away. And then there's growing pains. And, there was, I think somebody recently in the group that said that they go for their runs and they're getting these headaches and stuff afterwards. And the first thing I thought of was it has to do with some, like one of these energies, either carbs or fat. There's an imbalance there. And so it's kind of important to note that you do have to adjust if you are changing your fuel and how you're burning it and all of those things. So just being aware of that and yeah, it's just having some patience.
And a lot of it comes from experience too. Like when I started cycling more seriously, like a couple years ago, it hasn't been that long, a couple years ago, that's what I just would run into every time, because I'm a stronger athlete. That's how I would ride a bike. I would ride a bike with power. And so it was basically like a power time trial what we were finding out was, where does Jerred run out of glycogen? And I would find out always, like, it's like a halfway point of the ride too. Like I'd be as far as I was going to go from my house. And then I turn around and come home and be like, I've got no energy left to get home. Like I'm going to try my best, but I was doing everything wrong. I was operating at too high of an intensity. I was burning through all my carbohydrates. I wasn't fat adapted. So my body didn't know what to do. And so the answer, and what my first answer was, cool, more carbohydrates. And so I would just drink carbohydrates on the ride, and that was fine. Then the ultimate answer that I stumbled on and like more so now is, let's rely on some fat. Let's train a lower intensity and force your body to adapt to that fat. So how do we kill comfort with the information for protein and fat?
For me, for killing comfort, what'd you say?
Sorry. I said fat adapt, but slowly.
Yeah,
that's a very hard one to do. Very uncomfortable to do.
Yeah, most definitely. For me, the killing comfort would be maybe try some of the protein, maybe during, pre, give it a go. Especially since it said nothing, the protein did not hinder any performance. And then I'm going to piggyback off of what Kyle said, and yeah, maybe change your idea on fat, and that it's not necessarily something that is a negative thing, that maybe you need a little more fat.
Yeah. So that's my whole thing. The way you kill comfort with this is what's your gut reaction when you hear you need to eat more protein, or your gut reaction that when you hear you need to have some more fat in your diet, like especially, and this comes from experience with coaching people and they hear those things and they're like, all right, I'm out. Like this,
especially females.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to talk about as well. You know, like with the ladies, it's like they hear they need to eat more protein, and this is part of the fitness industry and why we kind of take shots at the fitness industry a lot, is the first thing that pops into their head is, oh man, I'm going to get bulky. I'm going to look like a dude. I'm like, do you know how much protein and how much training and how much time it would take for you to start looking even remotely masculine? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, It's not a thing. It's not going to happen, you know? And so just examine your mindset around, well, you need to eat more protein, and eating more protein doesn't instantly make you jacked. You know what I mean? Like having an extra protein shake a day doesn't instantly make you jacked. You know what I mean? Or, you know, having a little more fat in your diet doesn't instantly make you a slob. You know what I mean? It's like that's not what happens. And so just kind of examine your gut reaction and your mindset when it comes to these things, and kind of open your mind to seeing what these things actually do for you when you dial them in properly.
I've been hitting my protein for years and I'm not jacked.
Yeah. I wish it was that easy, you know.
Yeah.
I wish it was. Like, that would be so much better, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's
and there's a litmus test for all of these things. So like I would go one step further, because you mentioned eat more protein, eat more fat. Even telling an athlete who's more low carbohydrate mindset to tell them to eat more carbohydrates, like, how does that make you feel? Because there's not a wrong answer. But there's always something that you can track. Like for an athlete, if you heard me say, hey, you shouldn't be racing in zone 4 to 5, especially anything longer, you should be like in zone 3. You shouldn't be in zone 2. Just let's be clear on that. You shouldn't be zone 2 during a race. Zone 2 that's training. You should be in zone 3, touching zone 4, and then maybe at the very end go to zone 5. That's no matter how the distance or whatever, it should be zone 3 most of the time, and then increase it when you want to. But if you're like, I can't go fast and be in zone 3, it's like, okay, we have a barrier. You're not fit enough for what you want. You need to go get fitter. And it's the same with carbohydrates. If I say, hey, go eat more carbohydrates, because I think it's going to increase your performance because you're not eating enough, and you're worried about something, let's just track your body weight. You know, if I tell you to eat 100 grams more per day of carbohydrate because you're not accustomed to it, but that might be what you actually need, and you start gaining weight, that was probably wrong, right? Because your body's not utilizing that. But if I tell you to eat 100 or 150 grams more of carbohydrate, and you're just feel better, you're having this like rock solid performance, and your weight is untouched, problem solved. Like that's right. And this is something I want to hit on, because when we get into the carbohydrates, we talk about this. I've talked about it with Rob Wolf. I talked about it with who's the professor we've had on multiple times. We reviewed his book too, Why We Get Sick. I forgot his name. Bickman. No. Yeah. Dr. Ben Bickman. Is how many carbohydrates can someone have who's relatively low body fat, more fat adapted, and still like be okay? Because this whole keto BS at 20 grams of carbohydrates a day, and I have nothing wrong with keto, but like that magical number is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like everything else in nutrition is based off of grams per kilogram. How big are you? How much lean tissue do you have? But for some reason, keto is just like 20. Let's call it 20. Everybody 20. Doesn't matter. 20, that's a safe number. And I found out I can be in keto with over 100 grams of carbohydrates a day. When I was doing really low carb, I could still piss keto on a strip with like 120 grams ingested of carbohydrate. And so that's why I think even athletes who want to be low carb need to be looking at these things. Like you might still need more carbohydrates. Yeah, we're not on board with 500 or 600 carbohydrates in a day, but I'm more on board with than less, especially if you're doing any sort of serious training. So I take the very same approach with my Killing Comfort, is like just challenge yourself in all these different areas. And, you know, experiment with this train low. That's kind of what Joe said for his, but like just challenge how you feel about each macronutrient. And if you have a feeling about a macronutrient, ask yourself why. That's a weird thing in general. Like, I have a feeling about a macro. That's weird. Someone put that in your head. Like they are just like, it's just a measurement of energy, right? Like, why do you have a weird feeling about a measurement of energy? So that's my killing comfort there. But let's get into the topic. Joe, what are we talking about?
So we are looking at looking forward into our end of year goals and what we are looking forward to in our training coming up. Like what in it's kind of a progress check, not really necessarily an update. It's like hey, what are us personally looking forward to in our training? What is our mindset shift toward? What are we just overall thoughts on training now and looking forward for the next couple of months. Not necessarily specific goals, but just in general, where our head's at toward training. Kyle.
Okay. So first off, I'll just say, coming off of BCT, we've been off of BCT for a few weeks now. I'll just say I hit lifetime PRs on my back squat and on my mile time, which is great. That was the goal with BCT. And so that was really cool, but that was kind of it was definitely a huge test for me, not just of seeing, not just of hitting lifetime PRs, but of, can I commit to one thing for an entire year? And I think that was the toughest part of BCT. It wasn't just hitting a lifetime PR on back squat. I think everybody can do that, and I think people do it all the time. I think pretty much every fit week, we have some people who are hitting lifetime PRs on the things that we test, or, hitting a lifetime PR on a mile time and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's great. But to me, the biggest thing that I took away from BCT was being able to commit to something, to commit to one goal for an entire year and stick with it and stay with that training. And so I'm going to throw in a killing comfort part 2 here of, before I get into my future goals moving forward, of commit to one thing for a year. Like, kill some comfort and commit to one thing for a year and see if you can actually stick with it. Right. Because that was kind of the thing too, of like, we start with BCT and it's like, all right, let's see how big we can get our back squat. Let's see how fast we can run our mile. It's like, yeah, that's awesome. You get through that first 12 weeks and it's like, this was an enormous mistake. It's like, it was rough. It was rough, especially that first 12 weeks. That was, I mean, we really hit it hard. And that was a lot of training, and it was hard training to do. And so you get into that, and especially thinking about being a garage gym athlete, having life, having kids, having holidays, having trips, having all this kinds of stuff that comes up within the course of a year. And it's like, you can hit really big gains in the first 12 weeks. Can you keep it moving for, the next 3 cycles? So that was my biggest thing. And so I just want to throw that out there. Kill comfort part 2 by committing to one thing for a year. I know we have a lot of people who do the Murph challenge, doing that every week for a year, those types of things, but find one thing in your training that you want to improve and commit to improving that one thing for an entire year and see if you can do it, see if you can stick with it. And so that's the biggest thing that I pulled out of that. But for me moving forward, I'm going to try to focus on body composition, trying to lose some of this body fat that we've been talking about, and eating and fueling properly and all that kind of stuff. Still got some excess body fat that, even with losing as much weight and maintaining and stuff as I have, still got some excess body fat I'm looking to lose. And so my future goals are oriented towards body composition. I've found over the last few weeks, I seem to be a little more tolerant of carbs than I used to be, which is good. And I mean, I'm not just overindulging or anything, but I'm not having as many headaches or migraines or anything like that as I used to. And so I'm starting to introduce those a little bit more, and the carb goal has gone up a little bit from what it used to be as well, even with trying to knock off some body fat. But I'm on the Enduro track mainly because I've never done the Enduro track before. So I wanted to see what it was all about and see how Marco does things. But also, it's a good high calorie track with plenty of zone 2 work thrown into it as well. Actually, today's workout is a 50-minute run in zone 2. So loving that, used to that from BCT, kind of changed my thoughts about running and stuff as well. And so looking forward to that. But anyway, those are my goals. Going to try to do some body composition. I think I keep talking to the concurrent training elite group about this. I think I picked a bad cycle to focus on body composition though, because we got big holidays coming up. Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up this cycle, and I'm focused on body composition. I don't know how that's going to work out, but we'll see. Anyway.
You're gonna have to watch what you intake.
Not if you commit for the year.
What happens around Christmas and think? What are we talking about?
That week.
Yeah.
That week.
Fat cycle.
Yeah.
Official holiday.
Fat week is my life. Anyway, Ashley, I'm gonna go to you.
So I mean, everybody knows my training goals are just so different from what they used to be, and that's okay. I'm just currently training to help promote healing in my body, along with, what my physicians are trying to help me with. So it's kind of hard because I think I obviously have some stuff that I want to get rid of, just like you, Kyle, but, I have to make sure that hormones and stuff are doing what they need to do. My thyroid is producing a hormone. So then that way I can then focus on those goals. So right now I have to take a step back and say, before I even focus on body composition, because I can't really do anything unless my body is doing what it needs to, I need to focus on the healing part. And obviously this is taking a lot longer than, what I thought it would. And I think that is a huge takeaway too, is like, if you're working through some stuff, it might take a little longer than what you think, and just keep at it and keep going. That's a huge killing comfort thing. I'm still working on the mindset of this, like I mentioned last podcast. But I know in the long run, it's just going to help me, again, continue to heal and promote health. And hopefully I can continue to train for a very long time. Hopefully, I want to be that 60, 70-year-old woman still getting after it. But I also think too, for my goals, or where I'm going with this, is just listen to what my body was saying. Joe kind of brought up, one of our athletes brought up headaches and whatnot. And this athlete was a female. And for me, I was having the same issue. I was running, I was having headaches. I also got very lethargic, not right after the training happened, but like a couple hours after. Like I would have this high after the training, right? I would feel great. And then I'd come down, like crash terribly. And if my body ever does that, I know that, ooh, you tapped in too hard today. Not to mention, I don't ever let myself do that because I'm monitoring my heart rate now. So yeah, my goals are very different, but like I said, that's okay. I'm going to pick on Jerred because Jerred always goes last. So you can go next and we'll have Joe round us out at the end.
Oh, great. This is unexpected.
I like it.
My goals are quite simple. I even added some alliteration, bike and balance. Those are the goals. You like alliteration, Kyle?
You're welcome.
So it's bike and balance. So I'm getting back on the bike, road bike. I really enjoy it. We kind of have opposite seasons in Texas, maybe than the rest of the world. It actually gets very challenging to bike during the summer. It's very, very hot, while it still can be done. Not as much. So now really, to be honest, we have a mild winter. There's no reason to ever stop cycling outside unless it gets really cold. I did find out that like 40 degrees biking 20 miles per hour, that can be painful, but there's like a fine line there. But I'm going to be biking a lot more, and the balance part is just following Hard to Kill. So I'm back on the Hard to Kill track, and I like how much it balances out all the different areas of fitness. That's why I'm so bought into Hard to Kill and like always doing it. Even though I'm the one who programs it, I feel like you have to have this big reason in any training program that's kind of got you bought in. And I'm so convinced of our programming methodology, I'm just bought into it. And that why, because most coaches cannot follow a program they wrote for themselves. Like they want someone else to do it or whatever. And the reason is because they're not as bought into it. But I'm so bought in, not to like me, just the system, the method of what we do on the Hard to Kill track. Even if I wasn't the one programming, and if one of you were programming, I still bought in because we're following all the same rules. that it's going to really balance me out. So that keeps me going on the hard to kill track, and why I didn't like being on BCT as much, because it was a little bit slanted, and I could have changed that, but I just didn't want to. And then, I really enjoy biking. The only thing that's going to be different, really all the conditioning I do on hard to kill, I'm just doing on the erg for the most part, bike erg. So that's how that looks. I might add 2 biking sessions per week outside of the training, maybe on a rest day. And I'm also adding a long day, which I've almost never done before. So we're talking about anywhere from 2 to 3 hour training session in a single day. I always stick to an hour, but I'm going to have 1 day per week where I go super long on the bike, because I am going to ride in the Hotter than Hell next year, 100 mile bike race. And I would like to do well. I'm not trying to podium or win or anything, but long races suck when you're not trained for them. So I'm kind of starting to train for that now. And I've never allowed the training to really go past an hour. It's always been like, I'm going to ride that 100 mile bike race and I'll stop at an hour. Like, don't train more than that, but I'm going to be at least one day per week, very long session. So
are you going to do that on Saturdays?
I haven't decided the day yet. It's either going to be Saturday or Sunday or Friday.
Yeah.
So one of
Thursday.
those. No, it won't. Monday through Thursday, super focused work. Yeah. And then Friday, if it's basically like, if I can make sure everything that's done that needs to be done and I can stop at like 2, then I could go on a 2-hour bike ride and then just finish my workday around the same time. So like, but if that's not going to work out and I'm having to move that training day too many times, then it'll just go to like permanently, Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning or something like that.
Yeah. Joe, before you go, I wanted to hit on something too. Jerred, you talked about harder to kill. All of our training, I would say I'm on harder to kill as well. And I just wanted to just advocate for our training, saying that like, I can take any training session. I could probably take Marcos, I could take VDs, and I can turn it into something that I can do and do zone 2 and zone 3. So I'm using harder to kill, tapping in. I love the strength days. It's so great. And then when I hit the endurance days, I'm like, well, not going to do this. It's going to be a zone 2, zone 3 day, but I can still make it work. And so anyone, like, even if you're not dealing with anything else, but you're just dealing with injury or whatnot, you can take in anybody's training out of the 7 tracks and you can make it work for yourself. So sorry, I just wanted to hit on that. Joe.
All right. So I guess kind of similar to Kyle, but a month or 2 behind on that is I committed to going for a big back squat PR, and I am approaching that about it's almost been a year since I joined strength last year, and my back squat has gone up a good bit, and it's approaching the time where I'm going to go for the number that I set out for. So that hopefully will come in November, about a month or 6 weeks out, that I'm going to try.
Where are you at now?
I mean, back in the spring, I got 385, and my goal is technically my goal is 400, but since I don't use 2.5, it's 405.
I don't know anyone who's ever squatted 400 pounds. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
It's 405. So so it was a 400 plus pound squat, and I mean that was five or so months ago, and I've just been hitting with strength the entire time. So squats, I'm feeling great, and hopefully I can hit that next month. Now, since the weather is getting better here, it's making me want to run more. So that's a hard debate going back and forth of, I still need to hit this squat, but I'm also.
I got some ideas for you.
Yeah.
We have an entire track.
Oh yeah.
You want to get
an entire year.
I debated on going back last year to be like, to do your PR squeeze in my final 6 weeks. But we'll see. But I mean, mostly I'm doing zone 2s days, and so it's like 4 or 5 miles of zone 2. But yesterday I did some other intervals because I wanted to hit some higher intensities. But yeah, so I'm still wanting to run more because the weather is getting better, and I just like running more, but it's still in the 90s here. So that's like a sub goal, because I still want to increase my run times, but the back squat is number 1. And then filling in gaps from there whenever I have extra time at the gym. I'm working in more upper body stuff, because I feel like especially my pull-ups have suffered some, and I know that they got so much better when I was doing Murph practice, so I need to make sure I'm still hitting that up and balancing with the upper body, especially because with the back squat I need to be able to keep the weight up anyway, my chest up. So but that's like the third string of goals. But either way, number 1 is the back squat that I'm so close to, and then filling in some extra running And then whenever I hit that, we'll see. It'll be a different update.
I think too, it's probably because you played soccer and lacrosse. Because Jerred and Kyle played football, right?
I did play football. Yes.
Yeah, I did. I was a track
Played
athlete
football too.
That was like,
Oh, okay. That's why you like
I mean,
running.
I played football, but like I was okay at football. I was better at track.
That's why you like running. I don't know. I just have this like theory that it just depends on like what sport you played.
Oh
If
yeah,
you like
yeah. Soccer
running
and
or not.
lacrosse, I definitely ran a lot, and my position in lacrosse was probably some of the most running, but it was very interval, high intensity sprint, and like
Always, yeah.
on the field and off the field because I was in the position that sub on and off constantly, which is why I hit zone 5 when I play lacrosse and not when I train.
Oh yeah. Let me be clear. I was not a cross country athlete. 400 was the furthest I ever ran, and that was like, why so long? We did one. I was in 100 and 200, and then occasionally 400 for like the relay. But yeah, let's get in the workout and then get out of here. Dia de los Muertos. Who's got it?
I mean, it's pretty simple. I've got it up.
Yeah.
At least I think I have it up.
What you got?
I feel like I'm missing something, but
Everyone's dying to hear it.
Wow.
Death by 10 meters. So like oh my goodness, I just got that.
Yeah, that was good.
There it goes.
Death
Lord.
by 10 meters. So the kind of like the beat test. And so the death by 10 meters, you will have your 10 meters out, and then every minute on the beep, or every minute on the minute, you will do a 10-meter shuttle, and then you will add one rep each time. So death by kind of like you would do anyone, and you count up until you fail for within that minute. Rest 5 minutes, then death by push-ups, same thing. Minute 1 push-up, minute 2 push-ups, all the way up until you can't complete the reps within that minute.
Simple.
That's it, right?
Yeah. So the story behind this one, which is just like mind blowing. Okay. When we create Meet Yourself Saturday workouts, we've talked about this on the podcast. There's me, who makes it pretty bad. It's like, oof, I don't know. Joe brings us down. He's like, let's come up like here. Marco makes it worse. And so this is kind of the dance. This is the only one I wrote and had been a Meet Yourself Saturday workout for a while. And then Joe came to me and he's like, hey man, I don't think this one should be a Meet Yourself Saturday workout anymore. He's like, it's not hard. It's not hard enough. Like, let's just put this one in the archive. And I was like, what are you talking about? So I do think that this one, to Joe's point, can be, if you would like it to be, very easy. Or it can be a puke-worthy workout on the running alone. The strength, you're just going to kind of like, it's better to do this with people. That's all I'm going to say. Like, if you can get someone around your fitness level and compete, this is going to be great. But either way, try hard on this one. So that's just the story behind it. You can make it super easy, or you can make it as hard as you possibly want.
My only tip is, I don't know, listen to some mariachi music while you do it.
Oh no. That would be, I
definitely echo what Jerred says. You look at this and you're like, okay, no big deal. But if you're doing the sprints as sprints, they turn into shuttles pretty quickly. You're going back and forth. But if you're doing them as sprints, then yeah, it's going to suck. It's going to hurt. If you're just kind of, whatever, then you can.
Yeah, I'll give you a goal on getting past 20 on both. It should be the goal.
Yeah. And
getting past minute 20 on both. It should be your goal.
That's a lot. I mean, and that's the thing, like you add that up of how many reps that's going to be, you know what I mean? Over time, you look at how much work you do. Even if you go to 20, that's 20 minutes. You did a 20-minute workout, but look how much work you did within that 20 minutes. And that's why it's a Meet Yourself Saturday. Or you can do it for 7 minutes and you don't do a whole lot. And did you meet yourself? Maybe some people do meet themselves at 7 minutes, but
just depends on where they're at.
Yeah, just depends. But everybody's meeting themselves at 20 minutes, I would say. So
for sure. I won't beat a dead horse. I agree with both Jerred and Kyle. I'll just say that. And then
the dead jokes are
on an
awesome.
island.
But I just would say on your push-ups, you're dead when your form goes. Like, don't keep pushing if you are like, you're worming yourself up and you're
The
just
inchworm push-ups.
yeah, you're just, no, you died at minute 7 if that's what it takes for your form to break down. So make sure you're doing that appropriately or scaling appropriately. If that means you got to do knee push-ups, do knee push-ups, or some sort of like incline push-up of some sort, then do that. All right, Joe, what you got?
So I'll say on the push-ups, start your minutes in the up position, not down, because you're basically doing a hand release push-up. If you're starting down, like if you start with your chest on the ground, then do your push-up, and then you're resting on your chest versus starting up.
Are you saying your first push-up should just be a lowering? Because that would be incorrect.
No, you
lower down and then push up.
You start up and then you do a full one instead of starting on the ground and pushing yourself up.
And rest on your knees instead of your chest, basically. And if you, for some reason, can't do the shuttle, like the back and forth, if you have to do it in your garage and you can't do it, then I would just replace it with calories on whatever machine you have, especially if it's an Airdyne.
Or you could do it with burpees. That would suck.
I think it should be a shuttle. I think a shuttle makes it way worse. I mean, go to a but I mean, Joe's right. Slip. Like if you're limited, it's hard. Like if I were to do this one, I would go to the track where there's a turf field. I would not just, I wouldn't do it in my garage. I wouldn't do it in my grass. I wouldn't do it on my driveway. Like I would prefer to be on an actual field with like 10-meter marks and
test out your turns.
Yeah.
And alternate which way you turn. Don't just turn right or left each time.
Yeah, I would just.
I don't do that. You're right. Like if you, I don't do that. Like I turn on the same leg every time because I'll be faster when I do it that way. But it's not good for you. Like it's like you shouldn't do that.
This guy didn't run separators enough.
I know. It's like, oh Lord.
I know going in, I'm like, this is a bad decision. But I'm just going for the score one time, and I'm not going to have to run anymore. So I know it's like, I know I shouldn't do it, but. I'm not trying to.
The least of my worries.
Yeah. I'm just trying to get as many as I can. And I used to do death by push-up. I think I've told this story, but I used to do it a lot in the military with the whole like crew that worked. We worked together, and I would kind of. This is what would happen. People would always on Friday, airmen would start cleaning up, and so I'm the officer in charge. They start cleaning up. And what they're doing is like they're coming by your door, they're like sweeping, they're like looking at you, and they're just like, and it became this thing like, when can we leave? It's Friday. Are you going to let us go home early? That's kind of like what they're saying. Like, but what I noticed was the chores just started. Like everyone had something they had to do. Like every single airman, me included, we had something we had to do to clean up the shop before we would leave on Friday. And if we were done and everyone was done, the chance of them going home early were like way higher. But what happened when I kind of instituted that policy was like the chores just started earlier and earlier, like to one point where someone's like sweeping in front of my door at like 1:30. And I'm like, look, man, we're talking like 30 minutes, maybe an hour going home early, not like 4 hours before we're supposed to leave. And so then I just made it a thing. And I was like, under 2 considerations, like if you can get all the chores done, like as fast as you want, and then you can also beat me in death by push-ups, we can go home 3 hours early. And so that was like the standing challenge. So people would we would be done with chores at like 2:00. They would let me know. We'd all take off our blouses. We'd meet in like the main auditorium area, and I'd be like, all right, let's go. And it would always come down to like me and these 2 other guys. They were just like beasts at push-ups. And I think I got beat one time. He's a former Marine, went Air Force. His name was, last name was Bracken. And it would be like down to every single time. It wasn't like I was just like crushing people. And it was like I was in pain. Like, I don't know. I was like, if he goes one more, I'm out. Like, I can't do any more push-ups. But I just had just a slight edge on him. But he beat me one time. And like, they got to go home like 2.5 hours early or something like that. So this one with people equally yoked is a lot of fun and can push you really hard. So back to my main point there. But, that's it. We can end on a story from the good old days and get out of here. If you are
googly,
if you are one of our athletes, thank you so much for being a part of the community, supporting what we do here. And again, give us some feedback on this. We have part 3 coming next week. I would like to do more series. I'm actually really enjoying them. It gives us an opportunity to do a much deeper dive specifically on these reviews than we are normally able to do. We're normally trying to cover like this 30,000 foot view in like 15 to 20 minutes. So I really like them. So give us more feedback if you can. Anyone who's not part of our training, you can fix that problem at garagegymathlete.com. Sign up for a 14-day free trial and experience everything that we are doing. And we'd really appreciate it. But that's it for your weekly reminder. If you don't kill comfort, comfort will kill you. Gym Athlete Podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.